Hey, what's up, guys? This is Brian at Whisper Status 74. Welcome to the community. Welcome to the channel. If this is the first time you are seeing me, please consider liking and subscribing. We are real tech for real people. Today's video will be on Best Buy. This is the first time you've seen any of my videos. We occasionally do Best Buy walkthroughs where I show you the prices of the displays or TVs or video games, as well as the inventory. And as of late, those videos have been a little bit more important considering many of you are locked down, can't get into the store. But what many of you have noticed is that the inventory has been very much diminished. There's very little on the shelves. But more importantly, what you've seen reported, many videos on YouTube in the news, is that Best Buy has laid off thousands upon thousands of their employees while also showing a profit this year. It'd be understandable if they were laying off these employees because they were hit or crippled, as many other businesses have been. However, they've showed a profit and have still eliminated so many of their employees in store. This will be what we'll talk about today. And I want to get a little bit, not just into the evil empire of companies and things of that regard, but getting more into what happens to the employee and the vicious circle that got us here.
It's better to burn out than to fade away.
All right, guys, before we start, this will not be a rant video. This will also not in any way be a political video or anything like that, though government and politics does relate to loss of manufacturing and business and things of that nature. We'll touch a little bit on that in regards to working in manufacturing and seeing employees lose their jobs and have to change careers. So we'll touch on that, but it will not be a political conversation by any means. Also, I want to give a shout out to Reggie and Jermaine. Reggie works at Magnolia right now and is seeing things change before his eyes. And Jermaine has recently just lost his job at Best Buy. There are a lot of videos out right now talking about Best Buy laying off all these employees. Many of you have seen me in the store where there really isn't anybody. Now, in my area where I live in Connecticut, there are several Best Buys that I frequent. There is Norwalk, there's Trumbull, there's Danbury, and there's Milford. Now, all those areas, being that I'm in Connecticut, have things are more strict here than they are in Florida and in other areas. So yes, there'll be less people in the store where I am. But as many of you have pointed out, or I've seen myself, is that they've also laid out a ton of their employees. Now, this was happening before what's happening in our world in regards to the pandemic. But what we want to talk about today is not just evil stores or evil corporations cutting their employees. What I want to talk about today is the change in that industry, where many years ago there was a lot of pride to working at a Circuit City or a Wiz or Tweeter or any of those audiovisual stores, which also moves into any other kind of retail. So my own experiences in this regard, I'm going to first talk about a friend of mine named Vincent, who worked back in the day at what was the Wiz, Circuit City. And we'll call him Vinny, but Vinny had a great job. He was a tremendous salesman. He was ridiculously knowledgeable when it came to audiovisual back in the day, especially the ProLogic, Dolby Digital, surround sound, projectors, TVs. His knowledge was really off the charts, and he was a tremendous salesman. But back then, I remember, and many of you that are a certain age remember walking into those stores, and not only did you have your typical retail, your movies, and then they always had wash machine, things of that nature. But there used to be these amazing listening rooms. And in stores like Sounds Incredible, really high end. Forget about Magnolia. You would sit in these rooms surrounded by all of the different receivers, speakers, and you could hang out in there all day and talk to the people that worked there that really knew what was going on and what they were doing. Now, before we go further into Best Buy, there are a lot of people in this community that work there, that have worked there. So we're not ever going to take the angle that Best Buy employees don't know what they're doing or don't care about what they're doing. There are a lot of employees in any of the stories that we're going to talk about in any of the companies and manufacturers that just don't care about their job. that's not really what we're talking about here. We can talk a little bit about how the company took away your want to do better or your want to learn more about your craft. So going back into my friend Vincent, or Vinny, we should say, back in that day, I remember anytime I would ask him about a product, I would say, hey, what do you think of this little mini system or this? He did have that cockiness of, yeah, it's going to play some music, whatever. But he would just off the cuff throw out these specs, throw out, what these speakers were capable of, how long they would last, what they were made of. Now, this is pre-YouTube, obviously. We're talking about 90s and, late 80s and 90s. And he knew what he was talking about, but that was pouring over manuals and magazines and going to classes with those manufacturers. But when you would walk into a store and we would go visit him there, he was wearing a suit. And he had a nice BMW. He made great money. He was paid commission. There was also some bargaining posture there. You were able to talk to him about prices. It was almost like not a used car salesman, or a car salesman in general. We didn't know what these things cost. So, and also before we go any further, when we lament the good old days, I'm reminded of a quote from True Detective Season 1, where Woody Harrelson says to his father-in-law, if things were that good, or if the good old days were that good, they probably wouldn't have changed, which is a great quote, because as much as a lot of these things for me and for you were the good old days, they were not always the good old days for these companies, whether it's the prices of their properties or their bottom line. And all this is going to be about money. This will be a very long video. So these videos typically are about 30 minutes. I'm going to be all over the map. I don't read off a script, as you can tell. But we would go to see that buddy of mine, my buddy Vinny. And I remember watching him work. And anytime I had a question, I would call him. That was back when I was calling him on his home phone. But he would tell me what to look for. But I had such respect for his knowledge. And then I would watch his coworkers, the older guys, the younger guys. They all wanted to jockey for position to get that commission. And they would walk around that store, and there was a tier system, not just the managers, but the salesmen just had a certain skill. And it was advantageous for them to keep learning more about their craft. Now, a lot of these guys weren't educated. They were in regards to college. They didn't have to be. And that's part of this conversation as well. There was a time where you didn't all have to have a career. People could go to a job and enjoy their job, be good at their job, and be paid well for their job. But there was a clear delineation somewhere, at least for me, in the 90s, or the late 90s, you really needed to have a college degree to have a career, unless you were somebody who had a trade. But it used to be in between that. You can get a job at a corporation, or even at one of these stores, even at a grocery store, and work your way up. And with each step, there was pride and self-worth. And there was also that carrot of, if I can just move to this department, I can get better. I'll make more money. And then so it would keep you focused on your job and wanting to please your bosses. And you knew your bosses. And we'll get back into that into the next story. But back to Vincent I remember when we bought my first real surround sound system. It was in 99, early 2000. I worked in the city. I used to install fiber optics, and it was a great job. I commuted, I made good money, and I was ready to finally have Vincent help me. And we went to Sounds Incredible at that point, which was in Brookfield, and there was a whole bunch of these stores on that street. And small B&Ws were there, all kinds of speakers, listening rooms. So there was one little lounge, but listening rooms that you can go into. And we were there for 3.5 hours as he was trading knowledge with those salesmen. And we didn't go to where he worked. We went to this place where they had higher end stuff. And I remember just being like, look, let's get out of here. That's fine. And the speakers that I bought then, I still have. But it was his knowledge, and it was, taking this price and working it here. And we were there forever, but there was a skill there. There was a skill to knowing what was good and what was coming and what was going to last. And obviously that stuff lasted. But those stores closed shortly after. I would say, probably 2000, 2002, 2003, 2004. We've all had these crises. We've had, obviously, 2001. There was a financial crisis, 2006. I was part of all of those in my own life. The crisis we're currently going through shapes all of our careers. And a lot of times, whether it's a bubble or not, these tragedies just push what's inevitable anyway. So with my buddy, I remember watching him be at the Wiz, and he commanded a certain amount of money, did very well, drove a nice car. But what was also very interesting, and this is nothing against the Best Buy employees, but a lot of times when you went in and you talked to those guys, and now when I say guys, that guys or girls, I'm not going to keep mentioning which is which, but just guys in general, you'd walk in, and a lot of times that guy made more money than you. Meaning, you were asking, it's like almost like going to a Mercedes dealership and knowing that the salesman drives a Mercedes. He knows what he's talking about. In a lot of these other stores throughout the years, the employees weren't really paid enough to afford the products they were selling you, which put them at a bit of a disadvantage to really not only recommend, but be able to have a certain, they were proud to recommend this. I have this in my home. So I remember many times the guys and girls that would purchase from my friend didn't make the money he made. So there was a certain panache to the way he handled himself, that he, hey, if you can afford this or afford that, and he would point out what they needed, but there was a certain respect that he had, that they respected him, and it made the transaction just that much better. And not only that, but there was a camaraderie to going in and seeing your guy, seeing Vincent, going to that store. You can relate that to your own community and restaurants. I grew up in part of my life in Newtown, Connecticut. And I'll never forget our local gym, same employees, our restaurants. It was just a community. Those employees were there for years. They made enough money to stay there for years. I worked at a company called DuPont Biomedical that was in that town. It was called Sorval before that. I was there for many years. I was like a rough teenager that had my start there without a college degree. And the point of that community and working with 1,000 people and the Christmas parties and the softball games, but the point is the self-worth that I would accrue from going from department to department as a young man changed my attitude. And I know I'm all over the map here, but what I'm trying to say is, your company was kind of your mothership. And back then, you wanted to stay there because you were paid well, there was a certain respect to it, and you wanted to please your bosses. And I remember being like a young street kid and being able to get respect as I, would work a whole year without a sick day. You start off as a temp, and then you became, the most amazing thing was to become a full-time employee. Then a few years later, that company, DuPont sold us off. And I went through what's called the divestiture process. They basically tear the company apart. So part of that then went over to fiber optics in the city and was a great career. But it was really part of the dot-com era. And we were making a lot of money and paid a lot of expenses to travel, and, was a lot of camaraderie there too. And then all of a sudden, 9/11 hit, only a few blocks away. That career evaporated within a few months. Telecommunications was hit very hard, and then had to reinvent myself yet again. But with each of these little stories that I'm telling you, and we'll go back to Vincent in a second, was your skill was based on where you worked. It was based on, if you're somebody working at Sikorsky Aircraft, which I have family that was there, if you inspect helicopter blades and then they terminate that company or they take away that position, where else are you going to go inspect helicopter blades? You can't really demand a certain amount of money going to another company and say, hey, I'm really good at this. It doesn't really exist anymore. So going back to my friend, I remember, Circuit City, or was the Wiz closed, and then he went to Circuit City, and Circuit City didn't pay quite as well. They didn't have the listening rooms. They did have some of it. And I remember him working his way up there. And then shortly after that, they stopped paying those guys commission. And then, here's a guy that made probably $100,000 back then. At this point, it would be early 2000s. Then, so he was taking pay cuts. And then he went over to Verizon and was selling phones. And they had a commission at that point. That's gone. Even at some of these really high-end stores where they sell clothes, you have stylists that help pick you out clothes. Those guys and girls were commission-based. And the reason I bring up commission is there was an incentive to be better. There was an incentive to work as hard as possible. There was an incentive to be there early, to educate yourself. And then as you made more money, you would get the respect of your coworkers, of your clientele. But then most importantly, there was a respect and a self-worth for yourself. You could see your work and your pay. Once commission was eliminated for a lot of these places, a lot of people just became employees. You came in, you punched the clock, you did your thing. Why I bring up those other jobs that I had was having to rebuild my life several times, re-educate myself, jump into a different career, and start all the way over. It was why many of you are going through this in careers that you're in. But when you work at like a Best Buy, and I saw a lot of those videos where some of these Best Buy employees have had $1 million in sales, where they literally had, but you have to understand how the company is looking at you now. They think it sells itself. They don't think, whether it's through the manufacturing, the companies, they don't think it's you. You know, you put on your shirt, you walk in, you log in, you do your thing. They don't really think you're selling anything. So my point is, they've taken away your ability to show what you can do. You're not showing up to your manager and saying, hey, you know, Bob or whatever, here's a list of what I'm selling this guy. This is what he wants it for. You know, when you're at a Best Buy, all you're doing is ringing the guy up. Yeah, it goes under your name, but you're not really getting the credit for that sale. Now, you might have it there, but what I've seen in Best Buy is the guys selling the most, getting paid the most, are the ones being laid off. So with my friend Vincent, he ended up doing something years later in sales, but it was harder because he didn't have the education, a college degree. He went from making this money and what he created. Now, we haven't talked in years. I hope he's doing well. He's not watching this video or anything. But I remember even recently, or a couple of years ago, going into Sears. I did a video in Sears to buy a washer. And I remember the guy was talking about how these stores were closing. And the video I shot was where the TVs were. And it's all the cables kind of hanging down. And he says, yeah, I used to be a manager at Tweeter. Which was in Milford. And they were all in there in that store as well. And he was just like, yeah. He goes, these were, we made a lot of money, but then we would install. So there was a skill to being an installer as well. You know, running the cables and things that these guys self-taught themselves. And these companies realized that they're paying too much money. And that's part of the problem, which is the vicious circle of incentive making us lazy, realizing I'll make the same amount of money regardless of what I sell. So I'll share another story, and it's a Best Buy story. I was very late to Amazon, very late to buying things from Amazon. I love physical media. I love the concept of walking into a store, leaving with a product, and using it. Gaming, books, movies, doesn't matter. I never wanted to order things online. But I remember even not that long ago, I was getting out of work, and I would go to Best Buy every Tuesday. And on Tuesdays, Best Buy or any of these places that sold DVDs, at this time it was Blu-ray, they would be a reduced price on Tuesdays, but they came out every week on Tuesdays. And it was 2 separate times. I went to go buy some of my favorite films. One was Seven. And I remember showing up. I drive from where I worked all the way down to Best Buy. And I kind of took a little look at my watch as I left work. And at this time, I already had one child. And left work, went there. I went in, and all the movies were out, the tags were new, but it was about 4:30, and 7 wasn't anywhere to be found, but the tag was there. And I remember asking one of the guys who was just chilling, it wasn't one of the Magnolia guys, just a regular employee, young guy. I said, hey, do you happen to have 7 in stock? And he kind of rolls his eyes, and then he goes over, looks it up on the computer like I was bothering him. And he's like, yeah, ironically, they had 7 of them in stock. So I'm like, do you mind going in the back and looking for one for me? He says, yeah, no problem. He walks back. Like 10 minutes later, he comes back. No, we don't have it. And I'm not somebody to give him an attitude. I'm not going to, be a jerk. But I was like, okay. Look around the store. I was annoyed. And I get in my car and realize that it was like an hour and a half between me driving there that I leave with nothing. And I end up going to another store. I think it was a Target. And this is around where Target and those stores kind of stopped selling brand new releases. So I ended up going home. The following week, Saving Private Ryan was released. Same thing. I go to the same store and same thing. 7 still wasn't there, and Saving Private Ryan wasn't there either. These are new releases, and they weren't sold out. I mean, it's not like everybody went in there and bought those movies. I remember saying to a different guy, because I was there, even on the same day, I found a different person, and yeah, we have like 10 of them, which means there's a box of them back there. So I said, can you grab me one? Yeah, absolutely. He runs in the back. I'm hanging out. Now I am watching the time and realize, wait a minute, I spent a lot of time doing this. And of course, doesn't have it. Meaning he didn't even really look for it. So I walk out to my car. I look at my watch and I just walk back into the store. And I see definitely managers. They're all wearing their suits. And then there's the store manager in his blue shirt. And I literally just walked up to these guys and said, I want to let you know that you lost my business today. Which I've never really done anything like that before. But right away, they're like, what do you mean, sir? And I said, look, this is where, in that particular Best Buy is where I bought all of my TVs. I bought my receivers. I bought everything. And I said, I spent so much time looking for these movies. And you're looking at, wash machines and things like that. But it's guys like me that don't just buy your movies, but we buy your TVs. We buy, So he takes my name. This is the main guy, not the Best Buy manager. I'll make it up to you. He gives me a gift card. And anyway, I still walk out. I guess he must have looked at how much I've spent there. And, he calls me. He's got my number. He's like, I found the movie. Can you turn around and come get it? I said, no, I'm already halfway home. He's like, we'll mail it to you. So he mailed me both 7 and Saving Private Ryan. The point of the matter is, it was that day that I realized I'd much rather go on Amazon and order it. I want to support these stores, but that time that I spent is valuable to me. So it is this vicious circle. I want to support those stores, but they don't care. That employee didn't care. Now, years later, I would go through there and buy TVs there and have the 4K Nightmare and all the other things I was going through with defective TVs, and dealt with a very rude staff, even though I was spending $7,000, $8,000. Now, this is where I'm not blaming the employees. What I'm blaming is there was no incentive to help me. They weren't responsible for the sales. They didn't care if I brought the TV back or not. So yes, is it partly the employee's fault? Of course, but it's the industry. It's the lack of incentive. It's the lack of self-worth for this person to say, yeah, I'll deal with him. This is my guy. Let me make sure I get in the right TV. I would walk in, they would scatter. Here we go. They weren't making any money off me. Now, if they were making a percentage of the $8,000, they would have had me. Even the manager themselves, when I finally pulled my money out of there, was like, oh my God, I can't believe how much money this TV is. I'm like, is this the first time you glanced at this? Now, some of you that are watching this were in that store when that was happening. It was the KS 9000 and the KS 9500. But going full circle, they have nothing to lose. They were just in there working. I'm not saying a lot of them aren't working hard, but without the incentive, without the pride, the company can easily just cut you. You can't show your worth. You can't say, hey, look, whatever your name is, this is what I brought in. They took that from you. So if they're lazy or they are unknowledgeable, it's because the more skilled employees can't stay there. So you're only going to get a certain type of employee that also isn't making enough money to care. That goes over to your restaurants. That goes over to the things like the Chili's and the Applebee's and the Ruby Tuesdays over the years. Their employees, how their food was prepared. It's quality. And when we go into these stores and you realize the quality is not there, the employee doesn't care, the employee's not being paid to care, it's easier to just cut them. So am I blaming the employees? I'm absolutely not blaming them. I'm not saying they're all like the ones I've encountered. What I'm saying is, where's the incentive to be better? And that's what this whole video is about, is incentive to say, I do have pride that I work at this place. Not just, we almost have to, you don't need an education. You can be a great hardworking employee. You don't need to be a college degree. Now, going back to my job at DuPont, I was a street kid. I was a tough street kid. And going and working with these men and women, they schooled me and they raised me. And little by little, I gained respect and self-worth. And I wanted to show them I could do it. But if I go to work now, it's like either you're a highly skilled person or highly educated, or you're working at retail. Or if you're working at Burger King, you're just a Burger King employee. There's no incentive to be better. Even at these, we talked about supermarkets, there was a way that you could become, I had a friend's dad and a friend who made great money in the bakery department. Worked there since high school. It's Stop and Shop, which is around our area. And their father was an executive there who started in the store. But if you think about even crime or think about people that are in trouble, you give them respect and self-worth, and it'll keep them out of trouble. But if it's either doing something that's more profitable, but maybe not even legal, why would I work a job that doesn't respect me? I'm going to go out here and do this. If I go into a place and I have to just be this, or the Bestbuy employees don't feel like they're valued, you end up in this vicious circle where they're not going to do anything and they're also going to be fired. Now, is this the fault of Bestbuy? No, this has been done through a million different companies over the years. Bestbuy is just the one that we pay attention to because of the TVs and things of that nature. Bestbuy during this pandemic has done really well with the curbside pickups. And they don't need those employees. They just need people to actually, they're going to turn them into basically fulfillment centers. And when you think about over the years too, inventory is a problem for any retailer. Even if you're a clothing person, you remember going in, you could find clothes there was always seasonal, but you could find clothes. Now it's like, this is what we're selling, this is what we have, and that's it. Over the years with TVs, very rarely was anything in stock. They couldn't risk having thousands upon thousands of dollars of stock. So what they would do is you would call or you'd walk in and say, look, I want this TV. I want this TV. They'd say, cool, we'll ship it to you. And you'd say, no, I have my car here. Well, we don't have it in stock. They can't risk having that. They need to order it for you. And that's where we've all cut out the middleman and just order it directly. But that has also changed. My first experiences with Amazon was buying HD DVDs. There wasn't even a Prime. It was a place where they had sold them 50 cents. I went through them. I'd pay for the shipping and I'd get it. But I realized, back to my initial story, for me to go spend the time waiting for or trying to find this product, I also realized I didn't need it right now. I could wait a few days for it to come in. I would, go in and throw it on a shelf. I wouldn't even use it. So my point is letting me choose how I spend my time. But what this all comes down to, guys, is self-worth and careers other than educated, skilled, non-skilled. The trades died in this country many, many years ago. I have friends that work at cable companies that just lost their jobs, and they were considered essential. They cost too much. Now they're not unskilled. Even the Bestbuy employees, Target employees, they do have a skill, but there's no incentive to get better. There's no Doesn't matter if I sell as much as this next person, maybe I see a raise at some point, 50 cents. So that's the vicious cycle of all of this. This isn't a rant video about Best Buy. Best Buy wants to make as much money as possible. And what this pandemic has shown them is they don't need the people. They don't need the salesman. A lot of us are educated. We walk in, this is what I want. The guy or girl shows it to you. You're like, cool, I'll take it. They're like, cool. And that's it. I'm in those stores all the time. I hear the employees. Some are really engaged. Some are very passionate. But the problem is, even if they are, they're not being paid to be passionate. They're not valued. They're not, you love to just be into this. So we even talk about finance. And again, living in Connecticut, they're closing these huge buildings in Stanford, UBS, and all these huge corporate buildings. And while a lot of, friends of mine that are in banking are doing better than ever, the support staff of those buildings, security, lunch staff, even working at DuPont years ago, it wasn't just the guys and girls of the manufacturing and in the corporate side. It was the custodians. It was the guys that did the machines. It was the warehouse. These are all employees that can't just grab another warehouse job or grab another cafeteria job. They're all worth it. And that's the real sad thing is, yes, they'll continue to make their profits, but they have to look at it and realize so many of these companies over the years got so bloated with human resources and accounts payable and all these different things. They know they could outsource those things. And things since I was a kid in the 80s, all the manufacturing jobs were outsourced. But keep in mind that there was, again, that vicious cycle of employees making way too much money, doing very little with pensions. They couldn't compete. That's another political thing. We're not going to get into that, but that's part of this cycle. And now it just can't go the other way. For my daughters, they have to have careers. Spending thousands for tutors because I know I can't have them fall behind. They have to have a career. They can't just have a job. It's okay to just have a job. It used to be great to just go in, do your job, and find what you want to do. Now, this video is very long. And those of you that know me might say, hey, look, man, stay in your lane. Do TVs, do whatever. No. That is not what I'm passionate about. I'm passionate about the discussion. Now, TVs might get more views, but this is my own little thing. And unfortunately, for all of us, we have to be entrepreneurial. If I let anything, whether it's likes or views, put me in a box, well, what happens when TVs aren't a thing? Or, you're viewing Blu-rays. That's not a thing. Now that's gone. I'm not going to put myself in the box. That's kind of what we're talking about. Having to rebuild my own career because whatever I was involved in didn't exist anymore. When that DuPont was sold, that was one of the last companies that was going to send you to school, that had a credit union. Going into the city, working in a bubble with fiber optics, watching 9/11 erase that, having to start over again, being an employee, someone that didn't have that education. You didn't have that ability to walk into someone's office anymore and say, hey, look, I can learn this. And that's the problem, what we're all dealing with. Extremely long video. I apologize for how long it is. But the overall part of what's happening at Best Buy is profit. They can sell more units, not pay all these employees that they feel aren't valuable. And unfortunately, like even our video games and our TVs and things that we love, there's a lot of suits sitting at a desk just looking at numbers and crunching them. It's not just retail. Regular corporate is cutting skilled jobs because they'll pay a group. It's almost like the movie The Office. They'll pay those consultants to come in and tear a company down. I've watched my wife go through it. Many of my friends go through it. And they have their masters. They have all their education. So the unfortunate thing is there really isn't a comfortable job. I feel terrible for the Best Buy employees. I feel terrible for Target employees, Walmart employees. They're not great places to work. I wish they would give you just the pride. I remember, again, working at those companies. Now, I changed my career and enhanced my career during this time. I'm on my own. I'm freelance. There's no more coworkers. There's no more camaraderie. It's just me doing my thing, which isn't this, by the way, but it's me doing my thing and making money for me, where it used to be a group. There was that camaraderie and you would work for each other and help each other. So many of us are having to go solo. No more bands, just you going out for you. And that's a tough world to be in. It's very cutthroat. But walking into a Best Buy, there wasn't those conversations with the employees. There wasn't a lot of knowledge. There wasn't a want to even talk to each other. Yeah, over here. That's the one. But it was that whole vicious cycle of not, you want your McDonald's employees to be great service providers. You want them to be super, super nice and give you amazing service. They're not paid anything. They're not going to kiss your butt. There's no goal. You want to help crime. You want to help young people. These jobs used to give you a line to grow up. Those companies I work for raised me into who I am. Having that old guy or, woman be able to just tell me, hey man, smile, be more polite. It was okay to criticize. But there was always that goal of, okay, I can earn money here, I can earn money there. That's gone. And that is the problem with what's happening. Going back to my friend Vincent, that was his career. He was proud of that career. He had the BMW to show for it. My best memories of home theater and TVs, my first Sony Trinitron, being at his house and hearing, Laserdisc for the first time. The wonderment. He was cutting edge. And now, where is the, for us with TVs and things of that nature, going back to what we do here? But back to what I said to you about going into Best Buy and not finding those movies. My time is valuable. I don't want to go in the store. Their return policy at Best Buy with TVs has gotten pretty strict. Rather go through Amazon. And now back to what we talk about, and I'm trying to show you those displays in the store itself. There isn't any inventory. And we talked about this last year with I think the Hisense and the TCLs. Would you buy a TV without looking at them? And a lot of you were like, heck no way. I need to see it. Well, now you're going to have to. We're talking about new displays coming out. Now you have probably this next year to be able to see these displays here, but many of you are going to be doing your research from YouTube and written, but you're not going to go in and see them. But you're also not going to have the relationship with that salesperson that can say, oh, bro, I know what you like, man. I know this is going to be great. But, I'm not picking on the employees. I'm so sad they lost their jobs. But even like my friends from the cable company, perfect example, like my friends from the cable company and people at Best Buy, those that worked the hardest and made the most money were the first to go. So talk about incentive. Keep your head low. Don't work too hard. You might keep your job. But even a job that's considered unskilled, you can make a career at, but it's hard to show your value. And for all of us, it's hard to show our self-worth and our pride. And where the most of us spend our time at work, that is so important. All right, guys, long video. It's not going to mean a lot to a lot of you, but those are my thoughts on that vicious circle of pride, self-worth, and losing jobs. A lot of love to those I mentioned, Reggie and Jermaine. I'm sorry that your jobs are in danger. Jermaine had lost his job, but that's the vicious circle of what we see in retail. Companies just don't want to have the buildings. They don't want to pay for the maintenance. So it's not just them being evil or anything like that, but if they're trying to show profits, if you cut the meat, cut the people, a lot of times that will bring your profits up without selling more units. And that's what you're seeing. And that's going for real estate and these huge buildings. And unfortunately, what I mentioned before about not finding those Blu-rays, we are part of the problem. Those of you that love physical media, we're all streaming. And they can't carry that inventory. And real quick, something as simple as one of these, USB to mini USB cables I was looking for the other day. And I'm using it just to plug my controller into my PC. And I wanted a long one, 10 foot. I went to Staples, I went to Target, went to Best Buy, went to Walmart. Those are 4 stops to find a cable that they probably would have had back in the day at a Radio Shack. And that's a lot of time. So I went on Amazon and for $7 bought a pack of 3 of them. And they're here already. So I can't expect the stores to compete with that. And if they did have it in store, it'd be more expensive, but that's the vicious circle. That was a waste of time for me. I went all the way into those stores, especially now, to try and find something that wasn't there to try to support these stores. But who am I really supporting? I'm not really supporting those employees. So you have to go for yours and go for yourself. And that takes away that camaraderie that we're talking about. All right, guys, long, nonsensical video. Again, I apologize if it was too long. Those are my thoughts on the Best Buy layoffs. I'm thinking about you guys. All I can say for advice to you guys that have lost your jobs, you just have to try to innovate and try to come up with some way to enhance or show who you are and show your worth and try to develop an entrepreneurial attitude. Otherwise, we'll always just be waiting for these companies to let us go, which has happened to me several times. And you have to try and be as diversified as you can in what you can do and what you can provide. All right, guys, thank you as always. I will see you in the comments. Love you guys.